All right. So again, welcome everyone. Um, the three of us will do introductions, and then we'll just give an overview of what we'll be discussing today, and you know, hopefully addressing around the pondering thoughts around going to grad school. Um, so I guess first of all, let me actually share so you can see presentation here. Right. There we go. All right. So I can kick us off with intros. I'm Kelli Sholer, she, hers pronouns. I am one of the advisors in the anthropology sociology department. I was a undergrad myself here a while back now. I was a managerial economics major, and then I took some time after undergrad. I did not think at all I'd be going to grad school. And then through different circumstances, decided to go back to school 5 years after graduating from UC Davis. And I'll expand on that further towards the end of the presentation. We'll share our stories with grad school a little bit more in depth. But yeah, I've been working in advising since 2008. I really enjoy talking with undergrads specifically around the piece of what are interests after graduation, after they're done at UC Davis, and thinking about those kind of questions with students. So I'll throw it to Emma.
Hi, everybody. My name is Emma. I am a career advisor at the Internship and Career Center in South Hall, right by the Memorial Union, if you're not familiar with where that is. And I have worked for UC Davis since 2020. I started as a intern when I was in my grad program. Both of my degrees are from Sac State. So while I was never a student here at UC Davis, it's been really interesting getting to know the quarter system over the past couple of years. I've worked with multiple different program areas. We're a little bit different than like major advising. So I work with the program area of liberal arts and business, which is basically everything that's not STEM. And I've also worked with ag and environmental science, health and biosci. So very familiar with lots of different types of career paths. The only area I'm not super familiar with personally is engineering. So if any of you have engineering questions, which probably not given our green cluster today, probably get you in the right direction. So I really love working with liberal arts and business students because I was one, so maybe I'm a little biased. But I also just think that, in liberal arts and humanities, you get to do so many interesting things and learn about so many interesting topics. And there are so many career paths available to you, but it's not quite as clear cut as some other areas in other industries. So I really enjoy being able to share those opportunities with y'all. And like Kelli said, when we go into our own backgrounds a little bit deeper later, you'll probably understand why I enjoy the career exploration so much, but that's my favorite topic. So I'll hand it over to Chelsi next.
Thank you, Emma. Welcome, everyone. My name is Chelsi Florence. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the coordinator for pre-graduate and pre-law advising services. I've been in this role for about a year, but before that, I worked with the Transfer and Reentry Center as the transfer advisor. And then before that, I was a graduate student here at Davis. Still kind of, there's stuff behind that I'm happy to share if you have any questions about that. But I was also working as the pre-graduate student advisor for, I think it was about 3 years. So as a graduate student, I was also working directly with folks, advising them about pathways to graduate school. So I've done sociology through my entire post high school career, but I have seen that there's lots of different pathways, even though I stuck in the same like specific pathway towards like sociology. I found that there were a lot of things I could do with it, which was really exciting. I'll be happy to share a bit more about my role later on, but just to give you a brief overview, basically my unit provides support for folks as you all are exploring the possibility of going to graduate or law school or other professional type of pathways like MBA programs and things like that. And I'm excited to be here because we get to do a lot of work with students who are, yes, in the middle of applying to graduate and law school, but we also have lots of like one-on-one conversations about, do you even need to go to graduate or law school? How do you get there? How do you make sure that you're really competitive for it if it is the pathway? And when should you go if you do need to go? Because you don't always have to go right away. So hoping that if any of those things are really interesting to you, if you have questions about that, please feel free to bring it up during the presentation as well. And yeah, I'll hand it back to Kelli now.
Great, and I'm seeing the intros in the chat, and I'm appreciating we have a wide range of folks because I know that other advisors on campus emailed this out as well. So we have sociology and anthro, but we also have engineering and mathematics, and so that's great because we know folks from all different majors are considering grad school. It's a very common question. And honestly, the origin for this workshop this was created about 2 years ago was just from so many conversations I had with Chelsi, other folks in the ICC, other advisors, talking about how undergrads, are really just thinking through this question, but there's a lot of maybe pressure, I would call it, on our campus of folks feeling like it's an absolute, like you have to go to grad school to be successful. And so really kind of the impetus for this was creating a workshop to help reflect on those misconceptions and think through some of the stuff before even getting to the how do I apply to grad school piece, which Chelsi's office in pre-grad advising has a lot of resources on that as well. So on that note, we'd love to hear from folks here today. What at this point, if you are considering grad school, is the main reason that you're considering that at this point? If you click on, oh, we need to put the link in the chat, so let me.
Oh, I put it there.
Oh, you put it there, perfect, okay. I have my two screens, so I'm realizing managing sharing between two screens. Here we go. So if folks want to put a post-it note, if you've used Jamboard, you just create a little sticky note, and can just list, what reason you have at this point of why you would consider going to grad school. I think it's just helpful for us to see where folks are coming from at this point. So we'll give maybe a minute or two for that. Okay, so wanting to teach at the community college level, needing a master's degree. I know others may be typing, so I don't want to put pressure on. I'll just change it to this so people don't feel like in real time the answer is being shown. I would just say this kind of as folks are thinking of their responses there. When I was an undergrad student at Davis on this campus, um, it was a very different landscape, I feel like, versus in the last 10 years in advising students, where at least in my friend group, most people were not at all considering grad school. It was something that just a few people I knew, maybe who were pre-med or maybe wanting to do law school, were considering, but otherwise, it was really not something that me and my peers were even considering. So I don't know, Emma and Chelsi, if things were different when you were in undergrad, but on your campuses.
I don't remember people talking too much about graduate school when I was an undergrad, but also I was at a CSU where I think a lot of the folks were preparing to go straight in anyway, and sociology. And so it seemed like a lot of the people around me were interested in going into social work. That was also what my emphasis was in. And so the idea of graduate school for me became something that I became aware of because of in becoming involved with a pre-graduate preparatory program. And I didn't understand what grad school was about, but that was where I was introduced to it. So suddenly I found myself in a setting where other people were talking about it, and I had to figure out what the heck it was and how I was going to get there because it seemed like something I wanted to do.
Yeah, I don't remember really when I first learned about the concept of grad school, as far as like it being a potential path for myself, but I did also go to a CSU. I went to Sac State. They have at a lot of the CSUs now, and they're all a little bit different. They have like some version of an honors program. It looks a little bit different than the honors program here. So it's very much like a cohort style model. And so I take classes with like about like the same 75 students, like in different variations over 4 years. And I do remember a lot of my classmates in that, like a lot of the STEM students, I don't think were planning on doing grad school because their degrees were more terminal. I'll say like they were very confident they could get jobs with just their bachelor's degree, whereas I feel like more of our like social studies or social sciences, humanities, liberal arts, of my colleagues and I felt like we definitely needed to go to grad school in order to get jobs, which is definitely not true. You can get great jobs without grad school, and we'll talk about that later. But that was definitely the perception. And so, especially for my immediate friend group, like both of my close friends did end up pursuing master's degrees, which are actually needed for their fields. But I think having known what I know now, I probably might have taken a different route initially, but that's life.
Yeah, and I'm seeing responses folks have written around, yeah, wanting to pursue grad school to have more opportunities in careers. We'll definitely discuss that. A few people mentioned that. And then, someone saying they love studying, love school, don't want to stop after getting their bachelor's. And then a question around, is it necessary to have a master's to become a therapist? So great. Thanks for sharing in the Jamboard. Um, that just helps us get a sense of for who's here live today, what kind of questions or thoughts you have at this point around that. And so this quote by Mae Jemison, um, we just wanted to start off to frame the discussion. She says, I like to think of ideas as potential energy. They're really wonderful, but nothing will happen until we risk putting them into action. So the main hope is what we discussed today. And there are some action steps we'll mention in further reflecting on this for yourself, that you'll take at least one or two key things today and then be able to apply them in decision making around the grad school piece. So essentially, we're going to address the misconceptions that we tend to hear a lot around this, and yeah, talking about next steps once you've kind of reflected on, digging into the misconceptions piece around going to grad school at all and the timing of going if one does choose to go. And then we can share a little bit more of our stories if there's time, and then open it up for Q&A. All right, so I'll hand it over to Chelsi for this first section.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I was trying to type something to the one person who asked about the therapist piece. And so I just wanted to let you know, we do see your question, and we will, I think we'll address it at like throughout this presentation as well, but we also have workshops about that. Okay, so a common question or a misconception that we have students often coming into our office, pre-graduate and pre-law, asking about is whether or not you only can go to graduate school or go and pursue an advanced degree in your particular major. So if you're a sociology major, can you only go and get sociology? I'm just a weirdo. I did that, but not necessarily, right? You can definitely switch fields, but it depends on a number of different things. And on our next slide, we actually really want to take a step back from this question a little bit and just contextualize that, because your concern really is about, can you kind of switch fields because you maybe want to do something that's a little bit different than what you've been doing as an undergraduate. And so you really want to think about this question of like, what is graduate school, law school, whatever advanced degree that you're interested in, what is it really for? Right now, as an undergraduate, you've had the opportunity to get exposed to a wide variety of different fields with your general education courses, and then you've had a chance to get a theoretical conceptual foundation with the field that you have selected for your major, right? And so for those of you who are in social sciences and humanities major, you're equipped with the type of skill set that could open up opportunities to lots of different careers. I know that we have a couple of STEM folks here as well. And even though you have learned a lot of like very specific things about maybe your discipline, whether it be, I think it was like environmental sciences or something like that, there's still aspects of what you've learned broadly that could potentially transfer a little bit into other different career pathways. And so when you're thinking about graduate school, you're keeping in mind, what is it that you ultimately want your life to be like in terms of your professional outcomes at the end of the day? What kind of professional training and skill set and knowledge do you need to get in order to get to a certain kind of job? And so as you're thinking about what career path you're aiming for and figuring that out, you're working backwards from that to figure out if you need to get another advanced degree, if you need to get experience, if you need to get some combination of the two. And the specifics of that could look a lot of different ways. So sometimes the career that you're aiming for could open up opportunities if you pursue it in a couple of different pathways. Basically, there could be multiple ways that you get there. It really depends on the job. And so moving on to the next slide, the short answer is no, you don't have to, you do not have to stick only with your major. There are many types of graduate programs out there. Sometimes there are programs that exist that we don't have it at the undergraduate level. So like law school is a great one, a great example of this. Like you can go to law school and you can come from any sort of background because we don't have an actual like law undergraduate major. And just because people think, just because there are a lot of people who go in from the political sciences doesn't mean that you have to do that. If you go and actually look at law school websites, you'll see that many of the programs say you just need a bachelor's degree. They don't specify specifics. Same with like business administration, social work, public health, library science. Those are just a couple of examples of different types of graduate degrees that exist out there that we don't see an exact at the undergraduate level. With that being said, I don't want you to walk away with the assumption that you can just go into any degree that you want to. Programs still will expect you to come in with a level of understanding and a foundation in order to be prepared for the work that they have for you so that they can meet you where you're at and begin your training from that. So prerequisites is the name of the game. Basically, a lot of times they may have certain kinds of courses they expect you to take or certain kinds of experiences that you bring to the table. And you can get those like now as an undergraduate, but you can often do that as well beyond your undergraduate. So think about the idea that you don't necessarily have to keep sticking with, I don't know, I'm trying just sociology or whatever it may be that you're interested in. So this is why it's really important that you keep an eye both towards the career that you're thinking about and the programs itself that are saying that they will prepare you for that career. Just to give you a sense of the I guess, one more thing. So this next slide is demonstrating what I was just saying now about law school. So Kelli, if you can move to the next one. Um, like I said a little bit earlier, there are actually one slide before that, I think. Yes. So for the 2018 to 2019 cycle, I love law schools because they keep track of so much data and they have it out there. But you can go and find out the top like majors that are admitted into law schools. And so even though we see that 77% of students admitted during the 2018-2019 cycle, and 2022 was pretty similar too. There are lots of other huge majors that are also being admitted as well. Psychology, criminal justice, economics. In the top 10, I think that English was up there as well. Communications. And in talking with law school admissions folks, a lot of them are really interested in also seeing folks coming from fields outside of the social science and humanities. Like they've had folks come in from forensic science or from environmental science and things like that. And they really find it interesting because you can enrich their student body and you can bring a very interesting perspective to the field that maybe some other people can't. So I want you to just keep that in mind for yourself. So that's for law school. Moving to the final slide for my section. This is for MBA programs. So MBAs are basically like business administration types of master's degrees that you could pursue. And so here at Davis, and you could go and check out a lot of MBA programs throughout the country and see something very similar. What we want to draw your attention to is what is circled in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, that if you notice, 18% of folks who were admitted to UC Davis in 2022 came from a business background when it came to their undergraduate degrees. But just as many came from economics, a little bit less from engineering, a little bit, about 15% from humanities, a lot from math and sciences and things like that. So again, I'm hoping that this gives you a sense that your major does matter for trying to figure out some foundations, but if you want to switch careers or make a slight adjustment to another career pathway, that is potentially possible for sure. It's something that you can come and chat with us about as you're trying to figure it out. And thinking back to the question that the person had about like, do you need a master's degree to become a therapist? That's again one of those where we don't necessarily have a therapist like undergraduate degree that exists, but yes, typically you do need a master's in order to be a practicing licensed therapist. But the variety of requirements for that depends on the state that you would like to practice in, and exactly the role that you want to take on. But if you're going to be working with people, typically there's licensing associated with that certification that you have to get. So yeah, so I'll go ahead and just pause there and hand it back to Kelli. But if you have any questions about any of those things, please feel free to put them in the chat.
Thanks, Chelsea. I also just want to say, and I don't know if anyone here mentioned that they're interested in like the field of social work specifically, so maybe not therapy, but like working in social services. But for folks who may be watching the recording, there is I feel, misconception that you can do nothing in the realm of social services without a master's in social work. And there are actually a good amount of entry-level jobs that you can have in social services, at different agencies or whatever, without having a master's, to eventually move up, having a master's in social work, being a licensed social worker. Having that master's is necessary, but to get entry-level work experience, there are entry-level jobs that do not require an MSW. But yeah, like Chelsea was saying, for the therapy or becoming a psychologist, it is necessary, to have that master's degree to go that route. So just wanted to kind of delineate there a little bit. So hopefully that helps kind of demystify what kind of programs you can pursue with your undergrad. It's not always a linear path, and there's lots of possibilities out there. No matter what your undergrad was in, you don't then have to pursue, graduate school directly in something related to your major. Just for reference, like I said, I was a econ major, managerial economics, and then for my master's, I pursued a master's in counseling. So I was not a psych major, I was not a sociology major, and I, still did a grad program in counseling. So lots of different possibilities. I'll be addressing these questions around, the timing of going to grad school and taking, a period of time in between, going to grad school and your undergrad years. If I had a sound effect to play here, I would. But just picture a record scratch. Because I think before even getting to those questions, we really need to start with the why of why you're wanting to consider grad school in the first place. And I know that was put in the Jamboard answers for that, but digging into the why question a little further, because I think it's really important to reflect on this before just jumping to the when do I go to grad school. So the biggest thing I really try and emphasize when I'm talking with students about this is having clarity around your motivations for pursuing grad school. And doing that before even starting the application process. Like that really should be pretty crystal clear of your motivations of why. And over, the last decade or so, I've been doing, this work with students. I have found that it is a very um, common situation where students are essentially rushing into pursuing grad school because of wanting to have the comfort of having the structure of staying in school and not wanting to have that uncertainty around, you know, what comes next after graduation, after being done with their undergrad. And I remember that feeling well myself when I was in undergrad and not really having an answer of, what I want to do. But not knowing what you want to do professionally should not automatically translate to, okay, so then I'm going to go to grad school because I don't know what I want to do, for a career. Ultimately, grad school is where you go to specialize and not explore your career interests. It's not a replacement for other aspects of the career exploration process that the ICC helps walk people through in thinking about that further. Um, Selecting a graduate program and going down that path should be after thinking through, okay, I've realized I may want to pursue this kind of career, and getting a master's degree or a graduate degree is something I need to do to help with that professional goal. Um, and so I have these questions here on this slide that can help in reflecting on this around, why do I want to pursue this specific field of study? I work again in the social and anthro department. So when students tell me, okay, yeah, and after graduation, I want to apply to grad programs, and then I ask, okay, well, what kind of grad programs? And sometimes I think students don't know what to say, so they just say, well, I'll get a grad degree in sociology. And then the question is, well, why do you want to pursue a grad degree in sociology? Um, and then there's silence because a lot of times students don't really know. It's just, well, I'm a social major, and so that just makes sense to get a grad degree in sociology if I want to go to grad school. Um, and maybe it makes sense if, I mean, someone mentioned here they want to teach at the community college level. Yes, if you want to teach sociology classes or any kind of classes at the community college level, you need to have a master's degree. But if somebody wants to go into marketing and that's like their career interest, getting a graduate degree in sociology will not really help with that professional path. Um, and so, again, that flows into the question of, what do I want to gain from this field of study that will help in my overall career goals? And is grad school the only way to get to where I want to be professionally? Um, And, I think there's a lot of external motivators that are prompting a lot of students um, to have the perception that it's the only way to make more money, more career options are open to if you have a master's or a PhD, you're more employable. And we're going to speak to that. Emma's going to speak to that in a bit. There's also, I think, there's family pressures around the prestige of going to grad school or in your peer group. It feels like everyone is saying, I'm applying to law school, I'm applying to grad school, I'm doing this and that. And there's kind of that external motivator of like, it feels like everyone else is doing it, so I need to as well. Um, or, um, a faculty member, maybe who's a mentor to us, encouraging us to go to grad school and kind of feeling like, well, I don't want to let them down. So I'll apply to graduate school. Um, but all those again are external motivators, and grad school, is a lot of time. It can be a financial cost. Not all grad programs provide financial aid, so out-of-pocket cost, and that really needs to be a decision you make based on intrinsic motivations, like you really want to do this because it's an intentional decision you've made after doing research with the kind of career you want to do, that this is needed, or there's a genuine interest in, for example, becoming a teacher. You have to have a teaching credential. So if that's a career you really want to pursue, then yes, it makes sense to, pursue um, grad school and getting your teaching credential. But having it be, I guess, a decision, and like this quote says, um, making a decision out of intentionality and purpose instead of out of fear. Um, and so just really wanting to, help y'all feel like you can think through, is the main reason I'm wanting to go out of fear of the unknown after graduation, or fear of letting down my family, or fear of not finding a job, or is it really because it's for an intentional, purposeful reason that you've really thought about and come to the conclusion like it does make sense um, to pursue grad school. So then the question um, can become, should I go directly after undergrad? And there's this very common refrain I hear that students tell me that they typically hear from parents that, well, if you don't go right after undergrad, like you'll never go. So you just need to go right after you graduate. Um, and, that assumes a lot of things. Grad programs, the reality is grad programs will always be there. Law schools are always going to be there. All these different programs are going to be there. Whenever you decide, if it makes sense and when, the timing works for you, um, those programs will still be there. And so there's not a right time to go. It really is a completely customized, personalized decision of what are your life circumstances. Um, and sometimes, honestly, it maybe makes sense to get work experience before pursuing a grad program. Even if you decide, I want to become a therapist, or I want to do something that is going to need a grad degree eventually, it can still make sense to get some entry level work without needing a master's in that field, maybe working at a nonprofit or working at an agency that has entry level jobs that don't need a master's, so that you have some applicable work experience when you apply to grad programs that you can then speak to in your personal statement of, I've realized I really do want to pursue, counseling, because in my position at this nonprofit working with unhoused folks, I really realized I want to work with a specific population. Like, you have then life experience you can speak to if you get some work experience after undergrad versus going directly into grad school. And MBA programs especially want people to have work experience before applying. Um, and not have people be directly out of grad school. I don't know the leaning with law school. I don't know if Chelsea, you want to speak to that, if they prefer that folks have some work experience, at a law firm or something that's adjacent to the field before applying directly out of undergrad. I don't know, admissions wise, if that looks better.
Yeah, I think it depends on the person. Like if you are someone who's been working and you know that you want to go to law school, you've gotten a lot of experiences and it's just, you have a good sense of like how you're going to pay for it, why you want to go. You don't have to know what kind of law you want to pursue, but you have a genuine sense of like what you want to do with the degree, because it doesn't always mean just going and becoming a practicing attorney in a courtroom, but you have a general sense of the things I'm interested in doing would be um, would be enhanced by me having this JD, then going straight in is fine. But if you need a break or you do need to get some other experience, you want to try to get some certainty about whether or not a law degree is necessary for the work that you're interested in, because maybe you're interested in policy work, but you don't necessarily have to have a law degree to do that. Or you want to go and see on the ground like what it's like before eventually going back. There's a lot of good reasons to consider getting some professional experience before that. And I'll put in the chat, we do have a gap year workshop that we cover some of this stuff a bit more in depth. So if folks want to attend that down the road, the details will be in the chat.
Perfect. Yeah. So again, I think, the answer to going directly after undergrad is it really depends. But the assumption should not be that if you don't go right after undergrad, you'll never go, you'll lose momentum. I find that to be flawed thinking because it really depends on each person's situation. And a lot of times, honestly, it can be best to not go directly after undergrad and to really give yourself some time of getting some experience after undergrad to really confirm what kind of path you're on professionally and if grad school needs to be part of the picture. And I guess that's just lastly what I really want to emphasize about this question in general is it's making this assumption that it's not a matter of if you go to grad school, but when. And so again, just kind of erasing that thinking and working from a baseline of you may realize with careers you're interested in, you may never need to go to grad school, and that is completely fine. And you can be very successful and fulfilled professionally and not have a grad degree. And that is, I think just giving yourself permission that that is also an option. Not pursuing graduate school is a perfectly fine option. And I feel like students on our campus specifically just really need to hear that validation because I think there's just so much pressure around assuming everyone in their life is going to grad school. However, if you've done research, you have a specific purpose and intention of like I really have found this is the path I want to pursue with needing a grad degree, then like Chelsi was saying, the question around taking a gap year, is it bad to take more than one gap year? I also just want to kind of normalize not calling the time in between, a gap year, but rather just a gap. It could be a year, it could be 3 years, it could be 5 years, it could be longer than that. I've known people who've made pivots and gone back to get a grad degree 10 or 15 years later because they've made a total career pivot. My partner did that. He was a genetics major at Davis, realized 10 years after graduating, he actually loves math and spreadsheets and accounting and went back and got his MBA and accounting certificate and totally changed careers. So it may be years down the line. And so your gap could become much longer than 1 year. Totally fine. So, there's not a set amount of time that is best for having a gap. Um, it really is unique to your own journey and what career area you're interested in. And what may be needed to move further up in that field. And like I said, with social work, having some years that you get an entry level position somewhere And then it may come to a point where, okay, to move up further at that organization, you need to have a master's in social work. The benefit of having that situation is you may then find that an employer is willing to help pay for your grad school instead of going directly after undergrad. um, if you get work experience somewhere and then the grad program is related to that field, there could be a situation where employers are willing to pay for some or all of your graduate program as a way to retain you. Not all the time, but there are situations where that does happen. Um, so um, so yeah, I think the gap, we can just call it a gap. We don't need to put pressure on ourselves to call it a gap year and limit it to 1 year. But just to kind of dispel what a gap year looks like, it's actually not a year. It's not a 12-month year. If folks are thinking, okay, well, I'll take a gap year and then, try and go to grad school the fall, not like the fall directly after graduating, but the fall after that. Um, that would look something like this actually. So if you graduate, let's say in June of 2024, and then you're wanting to apply for the following cycle to start a grad program in fall 25, you actually basically just have a summer. Um, and then applications for a lot of grad programs start sometimes 9 months ahead of time. So applying sometime that fall, right after you graduate, so like 3 months after you graduate, to then start a grad program the next fall. So that's actually not tons of time. It's not really a year. It's, applying to a grad program just a few months after you graduate to then start the following fall. So that's still a pretty condensed timeline. Um, I don't know, Chelsea, if you have thoughts around that as well, but when people see it laid out visually like this, people then realize, oh, maybe I will take a few years, instead of, just calling it a gap year,
Yeah,
because
no,
it condenses things.
exactly. No, I think you hit it right on the head in terms of understanding what does it really mean when it says you're taking 1 year versus more years, and what's the trade-offs in terms of what starts showing up on your application. Like with this, you'll have all of your years at Davis plus a couple months after. But yeah, if you actually want to get some professional experience, some additional research experience, you might want to take some additional time beyond just a single year after graduation.
All right, so I'm going to shift it over to Emma, who's going to talk about the misconceptions around employability and the career piece. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so we do have this worksheet, and Chelsea or Emma will put a link in the chat, from the pre-grad manual. So this speaks to a lot of the things I just discussed, but in a way where you could, kind of like a little journaling activity, if you feel like this would be a helpful guided exercise for yourself. Um, Around, again, identifying your main motivators. Are they mainly external motivators, or is there some, intrinsic internal motivators, that are really based in, the research you've done and a specific intention and purpose, um, and reflecting on that further through this worksheet. So feel free to do that on your own if you would find it to be helpful. And now I will pass it over to Emma.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Sorry, I couldn't unmute for a second. Hey everybody, so let's talk important things like money. Is a grad degree necessary to get a good job? Will it automatically lead to more money? I think the answers are on the next slide. So Kelly, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So is a grad degree necessary for a good job? Not necessarily. It may be good for the job that you want, but it is not necessary for every single job. You can have a wonderful, fulfilling life, still potentially make good money. Also, good money is a completely subjective term without ever having to go to grad school. I think there's more on that slide. So to get more into it, I think we've kind of repeated a lot of this information already, but like it is very important. When we're talking about the social sciences and the humanities, there may be certain jobs or careers out there that do need master's degrees, or in the case of mental health, a lot of the times what really you need is a license, like a state approved license, and what the state requires is you to have a master's degree in a very specific program. But that is certainly not the case for every career, every occupation out there. So we'll talk about a few today, but there will be many more that we can talk about. And to reiterate what Chelsi and Kelli have already mentioned, especially when it comes to mental health, there are many professions in mental health right now. Some of them do require licenses, some of them do not. Some of them require master's degrees, some do not. And so I'll actually have a slide at the end of my section that goes into a little bit of this, in specifically for the county of Sacramento. I think it's a great example. But yes, the answer is you do not need a master's degree in order to get a good job, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next couple of slides. I would also argue, what is your definition of good? That depends on each and every one of us. When we're talking about jobs, it's really important to look at jobs holistically. And what I mean by that is like, how does your job, how does your career fit into your entire life plan? It's okay if you don't have a life plan already. I still don't have one. And I have a master's degree in career counseling. Like that, it's just the way I move through the world. But there are lots of things that I know about myself and how I move through the world, so I can articulate what I need and want in a job. And some of that comes from my interests. Some of that comes from the things that I'm good at. Some of that comes from my values. And I think values is an understated piece of that puzzle in what makes a good life. For me, that means family. For me, that means personal time off. For me, that means like getting to learn new things. I don't want to do like the same thing every day. That may be totally different for each and every one of you. So thinking about good, it's really important to put it in the context of what does good mean for you. If you ever want to make an appointment at the ICC, we have like values activities where you can get a little bit more information on specifically values, assessments. I think I'll talk about that at the end of my slides as well. But values is a really important piece of like designing your life and thinking about your life in totality. And that's a piece that like oftentimes we've thought about like in abstract, but we haven't really put pen to paper and really like talked about it specifically. And when you articulate some of those things, sometimes it's much easier to put it into focus of like, oh, you know what, this career actually does fit my values, but this particular job at this particular organization does not fit my values, etc. So when we put it into that lens, it kind of makes it a little bit easier to identify. And that's more of that like intrinsic motivation and self-motivation. It makes it a little bit easier to say like, okay, how does this match to this external thing? Okay, so we have a good list to start off with here. I do want to let you know we have even more information on the ICC website, specifically regarding UC Davis students. So this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and here just, excuse me, some occupations that only require a bachelor's degree. So it's going to vary, right? Accountants and auditors, you can be an accountant, have a bachelor's degree. UI, UX, paralegals, legal assistants, public relations specialists, right? Writers and authors, interpreters and translators, trying to just kind of go around, not read everything. Medical and health services managers, right? Human resource specialists. Quite a variety across multiple different types of industries. Like I said, if you go to our website, which I don't know that we have time for that today, but the ICC tries to compile as much data about y'all as possible and what you do with your degrees. So if you ever do decide to go, oh, thank you, Chelsi, to that website, it's listed by major. Now I will warn you, some of that information is not super like in depth. The way we get that information is through a survey, still helpful. But if people aren't sharing information on the survey, like we can't pull the information out of thin air. But these are positions are all within 1 year of graduation. So these people have not gone on, to get a master's degree or a PhD. They have not like been in that field for 10 to 15 years. This is like within 1 year of graduation. So just to give you some context on what UC Davis specific students have done, that might be a helpful list to look at. Some of the newer majors are not on there. Like I said, it was a little behind, but it's still a good place to start. And there's a link on all of those pages to an external website called What Can I Do with This Major? And that is also a great website. That's an external site where it goes like really broadly by industry. So both of those are two great resources just to see like what can you do with your degree. And again, they're talking for the most part about bachelor's degrees. There's a couple of pages that are the exception. One of them is counseling. I think the other one is like medical field. Okay, so let's talk when it is required. So if we look at the right-hand side of this slide, you can see that some of these all of these occupations on the right-hand side do require advanced degrees. So that's going to include lawyers, counselors or therapists. Counselors and therapists, somewhat interchangeable like terms as far as like licensure and career wise in the state of California. Other states it will vary. Health specialists, nurse practitioners, education administrators often need advanced degrees, healthcare workers, post-secondary teachers, right? So high school, you'll at K through 12, you'll need a credential at least. Physical therapists, speech language pathologists. These are examples of like careers where you do need a degree, an advanced degree. Now, I will also point out, I think I have it in a couple of slides, but I'll kind of just talk about it now a little bit. My experience with most of you when you're applying to grad school, when you've decided to apply, is you're working on your resumes for grad school admittance. And many times your grad school, depending on the program, will stipulate that they need you need certain amount of hours, you need certain experiences to be a competitive candidate. And this is where it kind of goes back from like Chelsi's domain, career services domain, back and forth, because a lot of the time when you're talking about experiences, you're going to come to the ICC and be like, how can I get an internship? How can I be competitive? And internships, volunteering, part-time jobs, full-time jobs, they can all serve multiple purposes. One of career exploration, like if you go into a job and you're like, this is going to be great and it's terrible, try to figure out why it's terrible. Is it the place? Is it the setting? Is it the people? Is it the work you're doing? Those are all very important questions to consider. The other piece is, yeah, you're getting experience doing that thing. I can't tell you enough how important that piece of it is to get your hands dirty, not literally always, but get your hands dirty and do that thing, because that's going to tell you so much about an experience that learning about it in classes and learning about it online, those are going to tell you things as well. But getting into that field and doing that thing as much as you can is going to tell you so much. And that's going to be really important. And that's what's going to help you speak to those experiences when you're writing your resume or your CV for graduate school. So things to consider. Again, there are many degrees out there or many careers out there that you do not need a bachelor's degree. And then there are some that you do. Sorry, I got a little off track with that one, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. Okay. So will a grad degree automatically lead to more money? Again, not necessarily. It depends on the positions you're applying for. It also will depend on, what is that cost to benefit ratio? And that will depend on every individual person. It will depend on the programs you apply to. It will depend on what fields and industries those careers are going to be in. So the average national bachelor or the average earnings for someone with a bachelor's degree overall is about $69,000 a year. Again, give or take, different states, different qualifications, different industries, right? That's a huge, huge number. the great thing about this website actually is that you can get very specific and you can actually look at specific occupations, and you can look at specific areas location wise. So you can get an answer that's a little bit more specific. But just to give you some broad strokes, right? Overall, people with a master's degree nationwide, 82,000. So about $13,000 more a year on average. You tell me if that's worth it to you, right? For some of you, yes. For some of you, you're like, all this work and only $13,000 more. I don't know, right? That depends on you. Now, I will say again, it varies. So we also need to consider how much is that education going to cost you. Kelli and Chelsi already mentioned this, but sometimes depending on the programs you're applying to, they can be very expensive. Sometimes if you have worked for a particular employer for a number of years, one of their benefits may be that they will, they will
My
help you.
screen froze. I'm gonna unfreeze it, so it'll take a second.
Okay, no worries. One of the benefits of working for an employer is that sometimes they will pay for that degree for you. A great example is Sac County. Sac County has multiple different departments. One specific department that you may be interested to know about is their social work department. If you're interested in careers in mental health or careers in social services, because there is a huge overlap, is that Sac County, one of the benefits is that if you work there for a certain amount of time and you're interested in going to grad school, one of the benefits is that they may pay for you to go to grad school. Now, there is a stipulation that you like continue to work there while you get your degree. And depending on the organization, there may be like, you may have like a commitment to stay on for a couple of years afterwards so that like the people who paid for your degree are reaping the benefits of your knowledge now. But that's a really important consideration to consider when you talk about, is it worth it to go to grad school when we're talking about money? So some things that you have to consider, right? Is there funding available? Is your employer going to pay for it? Or are there fellowships or scholarships or assistantships that you can take? Something also to consider, master's degree versus PhD. I think Chelsi, you're probably more qualified to talk about this than I am, but PhD, a lot of those are paid sometimes partially. Master's degrees, you kind of have to seek out that funding on your own. So different considerations for different levels of programming. Do you need to take out loans? Lots of discussion about loans right now. That is a huge consideration. Think about what is going to be right for you and your partner or your family, whatever your situation is, right? Can you work while you're enrolled? Sometimes programs are really intense and maybe you cannot. I worked full-time during my degree because it was pretty flexible. The work I was doing aligned with the program I was in. My cousin just finished her she's a doctor of physical therapy now. Her program was 2 years. It was super intense. Luckily, her partner makes good money and they now live with his parents right now. So she didn't have to work. But money was a huge consideration for her and a stressor while she was in grad school. So again, that depends on every person and every different individual situation. So things to ask yourself before before you're applying and not when you're already there. And you've already paid some money. Again, will your employer pay for it? Like I said, Sac County, great example of this. They may also have other programs that they'll pay for, but again, you got to do that research ahead of time. And then, if you're in grad school full time, are you potentially losing money if you cannot work or if you are working a reduced schedule because you're trying to make time for classes? Like I said, I worked full time, but I also worked jobs that I got paid minimum wage at, which was fine because I live at home, but it was great to be paid an actual salary once I left. So again, all different considerations, and it's important for you to explore what is going to be right for you because there is no one right answer. It's only what is right for you. And then again, it goes back to your values, right? What is important for you is going to be different than important to the different importance in the person next to you. All right. So again, to consider credentials may be different than degrees. For teaching, you do need to have a credential, at least in the state of California, to teach most of the time. Private school is a little bit different. A master's degree sometimes will get you more pay when it comes to teaching, but it depends on the school and it depends on how much. something to consider. Maybe you just want to get that credential and start teaching and work your way up. Another thing that they can take into account is your actual experience. So again, when we're talking about grad school, a lot of the times I'm focusing on your resumes when you're applying to grad school. And not only do some grad schools take that into consideration of what experience you've already had, that's what employers take into account. So a master's degree is not necessarily going to net you more money than it would if you had 5 years of experience. It depends on the industry and it depends on the employer. So those are important considerations to take advantage of. Sometimes experience can be far more important than a graduate degree. So sometimes later on down the road, it is helpful. Maybe it'll get you a bump in pay, but employers are going to look really closely at your experience as well. All right, so just to give you a couple of examples on the screen, people with a master's in social work have an average of 60 grand in debt, which is, again, not insignificant, while their first year earnings may average $49,000. Again, looking at the Sac County example, if you're interested in staying in the state of California, I encourage you to look at other counties if you're not planning on staying in Davis. That's a great example of a time where you can still make money in this career that you want to try out or that you're really set on without ever having to deal with grad school. And once you get into that industry and into that working culture, you can see, do a lot of my colleagues have master's degrees? Can I see if that's necessary for me to move up the ladder? Do I need to? Am I happy doing the work I'm doing? Sometimes master's degrees in certain areas are also for more like management level. If you're happy doing the work you're doing and you don't need a master's degree, why are you going to go get one, right? So different things to consider for each individual person. The other example is graduates from Columbia's MFA in film have a median debt of $118,000. It's a private school. It's an MFA. Two things to consider, right? 2 years after graduating, 50% of them make less than $30,000. So that can be kind of a jarring statistic. So again, consider your work experience to be equally, if not more important sometimes than a grad degree when it's not necessary. For the ones that is, right, like that is kind of a necessary path that you have to go on. But for those of them that aren't, there's a little bit more flexibility. So again, master's degree does not necessarily equal you more money that potentially experience might offer. So some questions to consider, right? What are typical starting salaries for graduates of a particular program? You can ask this question, ask program like people who are currently enrolled in that program. You may also get to see people who have recently graduated from that program. Like a very important question to ask, I would say, like, if people are being cagey about that answer, it's probably not great. Versus if they're like, oh my gosh, I'm making so much money, you're like, great, like, tell me about that. Can graduates find jobs? Sometimes this is not indicative of like what you're learning and how good of a career it is, so much as do you know the job search skills? Those are two different conversations. Like you could be totally qualified for a position and still not know how to write a good resume or cover letter, and that could be the thing getting in your way. So I'd say like definitely do research, but also make sure that you know those research skills are strong in writing a resume, writing a cover letter, knowing how to navigate the job search process, because those are two different things, and it's more of a correlation sometimes than a causation. How will you pay for the degree? Again, lots of different things to consider, lots of different avenues to explore. How much will it cost for you to go now versus later? Will you need to move? I considered being a teacher, and to be honest with you, the program I was looking at, because I didn't know about other programs, I was like, I think I'm going to need to get married for someone to support me to do this. That's not the case for all teaching programs, but I didn't have those research skills when I was considering that to really explore that. And then, how much will people in this field eventually earn? You can do a lot of research online to find this. Also, informational interviews where you reach out to someone who's doing the kind of work that you want to do someday and you ask them questions directly. Great resource. A lot of people are very happy to reach out or to reach back out to you if you reach out to them kindly and nicely the first time. and get back to you and tell you all about their experiences, because also people like talking about themselves. So definitely take advantage of that.
Can I also jump in with this and say, in terms of the research piece, around, grad school programs, I think there's still some stereotypes around, the kind of program you do if you get a certain degree, an MSW degree, a teaching credential, an MBA, that it always looks better to have it from like a more prestigious school. Um, than, maybe a state school. And I think, well, Em and I both got our grad degrees from Sac State, from a state school. And I talked to students interested in social work programs or maybe MBA programs, considering like very expensive, getting their master's in social work from USC or Columbia, or, something that is a really expensive private school and will probably pay triple the amount than getting their MSW at Sac State or at, CSULA, or, um, one of the many state schools in California. And when you're looking at what do people ultimately earn, social work, we know people do not go into for making loads of money. And so really grappling with, does it make sense to do a grad program that, yeah, it may sound cool to tell people I went to Columbia, but like what kind of debt will I have from an MSW program when I could still get very strong education and the kind of training I need from Sac State or San Jose State or something in the CSU program for like a, quarter of the cost potentially. So even within grad programs, really thinking about, does it really matter if I go to like a prestigious university? I know that with like business school, people justify it, and there may be truth to it of, you make better connections if you go to a high-end school, at Yale or all these Ivy League schools, and there is truth to that. But it also is just kind of weighing how much is it worth it to pay for, a top name school's grad degree versus a program that could still give you very solid foundation and not cost you as much and accruing so much debt. So just wanted to throw that out there as well.
I would also reiterate that and say that, like, especially like if you're considering staying in this area, people are positively biased. They may not admit it to like programs in our area. So Sac State and UC Davis both have really strong MBA programs, both strong education programs. I'm very biased. I love the counseling program at Sac State. And I would say, like, if you're planning on staying in that Northern California area, like, why would you go to these bigger places, these bigger names, if you don't have to? Like, if you really want to live there and you want that experience, that's a totally different situation. But like Kelly said, right, if you really like think you need that name brand, I would talk to local employers if that's where you want to live and see like what do they really value? Potentially people who went here and want to give back to the community that they live in. Okay. So this is my last slide. This is just some job seeker resources through Sac County. I listed this because I do think that they have so many great resources at your fingertips, and it's not just for certain majors. They have multiple pages on their websites devoted to career ladders. So if you want to explore specifically like one job classification, it will take you through all of the like the jobs in that particular ladder, and it will tell you, if you click on that title, what position that is, what experience and education you need, so you can find out like where you would competitively start, and then at what like position do you tap out and you need a master's degree. For some of them you may never need a master's degree. For some of them you may need a master's degree. For example, social worker, you need a licensed social worker, or you need a master's degree at licensed social worker. That's part of the licensure. So you can start to see like the different resources. You can also see they have a great resource on there, all of the jobs you can get with any bachelor's degree. any bachelor's degree, and then you can even see like the jobs that you can get with like a specific bachelor's degree. So for my anthropology and social science major or sociology majors, you can see the degrees that specifically pertain to yours. For the other people that are on this call, I think I saw some engineering ones. You can see engineering as well. So there's quite a variety. And then, oh, sorry, I realized I put that in not last. Some ideas for taking action, right? Taking assessments. There's so many assessments out there you can take. Some of them are going to be directly related to career. Some of them are just going to be like helpful information for you to know about yourself that you can then use and turn around to see like what is a good career fit for you. So some of the more like less directly related ones are like MBTI, the Clifton Strengths. Some of the more related ones are like an interest profile, or will match you to specific careers. You can research careers and grad school programs that you're interested in. If you have questions about research and careers, come see me at the ICC. If you have questions about grad school, go see Chelsi. Do lots of informational interviews. I didn't do that in between grad school and undergrad. I wish I had, because I would have been a lot less stressed. Still found my path, but I would have been a lot less stressed. If you're finding that the search and exploration is causing you like an extreme amount of anxiety or depression or any negative emotion that you don't feel like dealing with, go see the counseling center. Like that's what they're there for. They can help you not only do that career exploration a little bit, but they can also help you just kind of process your emotions and be a safe space with you. And then seek out opportunities for jobs or internships. Like I said, the best way to figure out if this is something you enjoy is to go out and do that. Practice it. It's okay. The only time it's a waste of time is if you don't learn anything. That's a waste of time. If you find out you hate it, that's a great thing to find out, especially before you pay for grad school. And then make career and grad school advising appointments, go to career panels, talk to people who are doing the kind of work you want to do, and then make smarty goals. Smarty goals are great because they break down this like really like huge intrinsic thing, and then you're kind of breaking it down into smaller, more bite-sized pieces. Instead of trying to figure out like what I want to do with my life, I set a goal. I want to make like 3 informational interviews between now and February. I know when that's completed, it's realistic time frame. I'm not saying I want to do 3 informational interviews next week. Counting for the holidays, 3 by February. That seems like a realistic goal to me. I might have a lot of information by then, and then I can make a next goal. So take advantage of these ideas. You don't have to do them all at once, but definitely take advantage of them.
All right, well, I know we're running close on time. I do want to make sure if the folks who are remaining, if there's specific questions that you have for us before maybe needing to head out. So Betty, Christian, and Jennifer, I mean, you can feel free to unmute. I'm also, I think, going to stop the recording because I know that can feel a little intimidating knowing it's recorded. So we will end the recording here. Thank you all who may be watching this later. Hope it was helpful to you. And all the resources will be in the chat transcript.